Well, good evening, everyone. The H1B Guy here, and tonight, September 16th, 2021, Documented Dreamer Series Live, Episode 6, featuring contributors from Improve the Dream. But before we get started, I'd like to ask you, if you haven't already, to please subscribe to the H1B Guy channel here on YouTube and like this video so that I can continue to produce more content like this for you. I also wanted to mention the H1B Guy offers a variety of consulting services. I help businesses and individuals solve complex work authorization issues and the recruitment process while also bringing awareness to employment-based immigration benefits. If I can help you, please reach out. I'd love to hear how. Tonight's live stream is proudly brought to you by RecruiterNetworks.com, by Path to Canada, and by perm-ads.com. Very thankful for their sponsorship and allowing us to bring live streams and advocacy efforts like the Documented Dreamer series here to you tonight. I do have the privilege of, again, hosting contributors from Improve the Dream. For those of you who are not aware, Improve the Dream is an organization that's led by young immigrants who've grown up in the United States as child dependents of long-term visa holders without a clear path to citizenship. They bring awareness to the 200,000 plus documented dreamers while advocating for change that permanently ends aging out and provides a path to citizenship for every child who grows up in the United States, regardless of status. One thing that I did want to mention very quickly, and that is, if you have a documented dreamer, or if you are a documented dreamer and you're tuning in for the first time tonight, we need you to go to, if you haven't already, improvethedream.org/survey. And I'll share that right now in the chat. But again, that's improvethedream.org/survey. We're continuing to look for more documented dreamers all throughout the country. Specifically right now, we are looking for dreamers that are living or grew up in the great state of Kentucky, the Bluegrass State. So if you are a documented dreamer, or you are a parent of a documented dreamer, potentially who grew up in the Bluegrass State of Kentucky, please go to improvethedream.org/survey and someone will be in touch with you. So without any further ado, I have the privilege to introduce two more documented dreamers to the series tonight. Eva, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us tonight. And Niranjana, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing well as well. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Very excited to have you both. And of course, most of you are familiar with the fearless leader of Improve the Dream, my friend and yours, Deep Patel. Deep, how you doing?
Doing good. Thanks, Rob, for having us.
Awesome. I'm glad to continue to see with you here tonight, Deep, bring attention to the issues at hand. We've got a lot going on. So just a really quick format tonight. We're going to introduce and have Eva and Niranjana tell their story. And then what we will do after that is we'll get into an Improve the Dream update, talk about all the latest that's been going on in the world of advocacy for documented dreamers. And we'll take some Q&A at the very end. So thank you to everyone who's taken the time to join in tonight and who continues to join us. Just one last request, please like this video. It helps with promotion of the algorithm in YouTube. So I want to move on to our documented dreamers here and allow them to tell their story. That's why they're on here, the channel tonight. And so for Eva and Niranjana, I want to ask you both kind of first question, and I'll let you just take turns answering it. But where are you from, and how old were you when you originally came to the U.S.? Eva, you want to start us off tonight?
Yeah, I can start off. I was born in New Delhi, India, and I came to the United States, specifically San Francisco, when I was 7 years old in 2004.
So came to San Francisco in 2004, been in the U.S. for the better part of the last 17 years.
Yeah, right? Exactly. I've pretty much been in California for all of since I was 7.
Since you were 7, that
Yeah,
probably.
did my education in the Bay Area, did college at the University of California, Santa Barbara, and now working in San Francisco.
Yeah, and going back to New Delhi was like more of a vacation and seeing family than it was home for you, I imagine, right?
Definitely. I don't know the language anymore, so it's almost like visiting a foreign place.
Sounds like we've Americanized you then in that sense, right? Naranjana, what about you?
Yeah, I was born in Mumbai, India, and I moved here when I was 13 because my dad got a new job. And yeah, so since I moved here, I've been living in the suburbs of Dallas, Texas. Did some of my middle school here, all of my high school, and I'm about to graduate from the University of Texas at Dallas.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm very familiar with Dallas, having spent a fair amount of time traveling and working there. One of the largest IT hubs in the country. In fact, when you look at kind of the Fortune 500 list for who's who in IT, most have an outfit or a location in Dallas. So very familiar with Metro DFW, and I know the university you're going to and that program, so I know that there's big things ahead of you. So very exciting. Well, thank you both for sharing that. Naranjan, I want to come back to you, and we've talked about this theme a lot. These questions are repeats, but they're consistent themes here in the Dreamer series, the Documented Dreamer series, and that is this. Everyone seems to have this realization at some point of when they realized this was a problem. Naranjana, what about you? When did you realize that this was a problem for you?
I can think of two specific instances where I realized that, this was something that I wasn't like a typical American kid like my peers were. The first time when I was applying to college, like most documented dreamers, I had to apply as an international student. And, I also realized quickly that applying out of state wasn't really an option for me just because of, finances and everything. But even then, the idea of aging out was still kind of a couple years, away. So I didn't really think it was that big of an issue until I, was really close to aging out. And just going through the entire process of sending an application for a change of status, and just those months leading up to that, and the anxiety of having to age out and potentially turn 21 without having my F1 was really stressful. And I think those were the two instances where I truly realized that this is something that is really serious. It's a serious thing, and it's going to affect me for almost most of my life.
It's funny you say that. We've talked about this before on the channel, and the college application phase, and where you're like, I'm an international student. It's going to cost me how much to go to school? Eva, does that resonate with you? When did you realize that this was a problem for you?
Yeah, definitely. It was around the same time for me. I mean, I knew my parents were in the process of getting a green card, throughout middle school and high school. But it didn't really impact me. I had a lot of friends I grew up in a very diverse community. So I had a lot of friends who were also of Indian origin or of like other countries, but they weren't in this, but they were applying as in-state high school students. And I was kind of surprised that I would have to apply as an international student to college, that I wasn't eligible for FAFSA. I have a twin sister, and probably given my parents' income, should have gotten some sort of like financial aid in college, but because they wouldn't be able to afford like two like children's education at the same time, but I wasn't eligible for that, so had to like having to figure out how financially as international student we could afford tuition was like the first time I was like, oh my gosh, like this is, I don't know what to do. I was just kind of shocked that this is something, it didn't make sense to me, and had something I had to figure out. And the second time was when I was in college and I wanted to get experience as an intern. I quickly found out I also don't have the right to work under the H4 visa, since I was dependent on my parents' work visa. and felt that I would be getting behind in terms of the experience I'm getting in college. And so I actually didn't realize I would age out, or aging out was a concept until I was about 20. And a friend of mine who happens to be the same situation asked me, like, what's your plan when you age out? And I had I never heard the term before. My parents always assumed we'd get a green card in time. It wouldn't be a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
And so they didn't look into it as well. And I remember just like being so surprised and feeling so lost, and having to figure out my process of becoming an international student, process of like talking to the international student office, and and also communicating my international student status when I'm when I was applying for jobs and internships in college.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you say that, because a lot of times it is like a friend or a family friend that is the one who's like, "What's your plan?" Right? Your friend from college is like your similar age, like, "What's your plan?" And you're like, "What do you mean? What's my plan? My plan is to stay here in the U.S. and continue
Exactly.
on with my life." And a couple stats that I've read in the last few years as it relates to international students, and even individuals who were raised here in the U.S. and then treated as international students for in-state, kind of along the lines of what you were talking about. It varies by state, but the estimates are that international students pay anywhere between 50 to 80% more than in-state for tuition. And so when you start to think about like the impact of that, right, and how you go about financially accommodating the difference in fees, um, and debt is the way that you get there. And I've talked about it a lot on this channel. I'm very much anti-debt, and one of the things for me that I've been an advocate against for many years now. But sometimes you have to do that, right? That's
Yep.
that's the only option that you have if you want to stay to and live and go to school in the country that you spent 17 years of your life in. You have to do that, right? It
Yeah.
just is the nature of it. I wanted to ask both of you kind of a follow-up question to you once you realized this was a problem. And Eva, it sounds like you've had conversations with colleagues in college about it, but when did you both start openly talking about this? Was it after you aged out, before you aged out, when you started talking with maybe friends who were Americans who weren't aware of your situation?
Yeah, I definitely had a hard time talking about it even to this day, just because it's honestly it's the most stressful thing I've gone through in my life. And so I would mention it to really close friends, and family, but I think um, yeah, it's been hard talking about it. And only like more recently, I've mentioned briefly to my friends for a long time, like, oh, it's very difficult. They've always wondered why I'm not like a citizen at this point. A lot of them also immigrated to the U.S., but from different countries, so they've been citizens for a while, and they just don't understand. So I think I've told them it's difficult. It's there's definitely immigration reform that's necessary, but it's been only more recently, since I've heard of Improve the Dream, that I've been able to share articles and share people's stories that better articulate my experience, that I've gotten more comfortable telling my friends more in detail and my family, or my friends and extended family, of how difficult it is to go through the aging out process.
Yeah, it's like you're almost over being embarrassed by it, right? You get to a point to where it's like
It's
there's
almost
this,
so complicated to explain, right?
yeah.
It's so difficult to explain, and if you're not, and nobody, the average American doesn't have a good understanding of what the legal immigration process is like. And then by having to explain it in detail, it's kind of, puts me back in the place when I was really upset, trying to figure out my statuses. And it's just like probably a little PTSD that kind
Yeah.
of relates to it.
What about you, Naranjana?
So initially, the only people I would kind of talk to about this was my parents, and then also I have a cousin who's a documented dreamer. So we would kind of, I would relate to her a lot. And once I entered junior year, so as a business school student, a lot of times you have career fairs, and a lot of my peers would go to these career fairs, and I would go with them. But then, I would always explain like, oh, I can't apply just yet. And so that's when I would have to kind of sit them down and explain like, hey, this is what my situation is. And that's kind of when I started opening up to my closer friends a lot more, because they took the time to understand like what was going on with like my immigration process. And then recently, since I joined Improve the Dream, I've definitely been a lot more open about my experience, and even just like sharing resources with people. So that's how I've been like talking about it a lot more with like the people around me. And every time I guess like now that I meet someone, it definitely takes like a little bit to kind of explain like, hey, this is what a documented dreamer is. This is the situation. And this is like these are the struggles that we go through. And it's always, kind of it's hard to explain every single thing in detail, but I try my best.
Yeah. It's a couple points to both of your comments. And when I first launched this channel back in the end of June of 2020, very early on in the following month of July, I did a video called "What is an H4 Dreamer?" And the motivation behind that video was like a friend of mine here in Atlanta who had a documented dreamer, and made me aware of the situation many years ago. And when I decided that I was going to put myself out there in this platform, I wanted to make sure that I had some really political issues, that I think were systemic problems within our immigration system. And through that, I, got in touch, was introduced to Deep back in October, November of last year. But when we decided to do this series, and I first put it out there, some of my supporters, just friends of mine personally, who have no idea what I talk about on a daily basis, but still watch my content because they're my friends, are like, I had no idea that this was a problem in our system. And so it's interesting that you both talk about that, because that's one of the things that, for me, while I'm a very small player in this whole process, I wanted to make sure that individuals like both of you had platforms to share the story, and ultimately a timestamp for this point in history where we can look back on and say, look at the change that was created by bringing awareness to a wider audience. So we've also talked about consistent themes through this series has been how the 21st birthday, very unlike most Americans, which look forward to their 21st birthday and can't wait to show their driver's license that says they're 21, documented dreamers, it's a really different scenario. And I've talked about kind of the dread and the anxiety. It's been a theme of many of the dreamers that have come on and told that, their personal experience with that. But I wanted to ask you both, like, what was that lead up like? You both kind of alluded to it already, but Naranjana, I wanted to kind of start with you. What's that experience like for you, leading into the 21st birthday?
Oh, it was so stressful. It didn't hit me that I was, aging out, until I turned 20. So the year before my 21st birthday. And my dad was like, okay, so we have to start your change of status process right now. And I didn't really know what that meant initially, just because like I knew what aging out meant, but I didn't know like how mentally taxing that entire process would be, just because of the processing times and all the paperwork that goes into it. And as the months progressed on, I definitely there was one thing that I felt kind of was like a disconnect from my family, just because I knew I was kind of, you know, coming out of like from their green card application, and that I would no longer be, able to kind of get my green card when they get theirs. And so even like with that, even with my friends, they definitely like were supportive. Like they were always like, "Oh, you're turning 21 soon. Like, are you excited?" Um, But then I would always just be like, yeah, I'm excited, but this is the thing that's going to happen when I turn 21. And so, yeah, that was basically kind of like very stress inducing, the whole experience.
It's like you want to celebrate, but in the back of your mind, you can't really allow yourself to, because you know that it's kind of the next step in your battle, right? To maintain your status. Eva, what about you?
Yeah, it definitely felt like a time bomb. Um, like I said, I found out when I was 20 that I would be aging out by the time I turned 21. And it was very stressful because my parents tried to shelter me from the immigration process because they were just hoping, within the 10 years that it would have been 10 years since they applied for a green card, have been gotten their I-140, and they were just hoping that it wouldn't even be a problem in the first place. So after the first thing I felt was like, oh, how could my parents not have a plan B or C or D or like of any sort to, like, for my sake. So I felt like a lot of resentment through my parents, which is, I can't blame them because it's not their fault. It's the fault of the immigration system that they've been waiting so long. Like, my dad's a PhD. My mom also has a master's. We come from a very well-educated family. We've lived in California for 17 years, contributed taxes. So like they thought it'd be okay. And it turns out, I'm months away from turning 21. And now I need to figure out how to stay in the country. And it was extremely overwhelming. It was just very overwhelming, a lot of stress. And I had to, I luckily have a twin sister. So we kind of did it together, talked to the International Student Office, talked to immigration lawyers, talked to our office of the registrar, try to really understand our situation as deeply as possible and understand how to transition into an F1 visa so we can maintain maintain our lives here. And it's just like a lot of being overwhelmed, a lot of anxiety, a lot of fear that the worst case scenario is I go back to a country I don't know anything about. My parents can stay in the United States, but I would have to go from them, worry about my degree. So just endless questions in my head, like what happens if it doesn't work out. Luckily I got my F1 about 5-6 months before my 21st birthday. So I was able to celebrate on the day of, but figuring out the whole, transition from H4 to F1 was like anxiety inducing, to say at the very least.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that. One of the statistics, Deep, that's been a consistent theme as well, as we talked about an average of 10,000 documented dreamers self-deport annually. And I've talked about what that means for the talent pool, right? This war that I constantly talk about as part of the theme of this channel, this war on human capital that we're currently in, because around the globe, countries are trying to determine how do they attract and lure high-skilled, innovative immigrants. And I think that, to me, that's been one of the reasons why this was a cause for me that made so much sense as I look at kind of the future of innovation in this country. And we look at U.S. educated that are being forced to self-deport. And that's where I just automatically drew the line, kids aside. I mean, I think when I put it back to one of the themes of this channel, which is employment-based immigration benefits, right? You are both children of high-skilled immigrants who came to this country, and your parents have been in backlogs now. You're talking some, I've been calculating average waits here recently, anywhere between 3,800 to 4,200 days. Think about that. It's pretty astronomical when you put a number on that. But I wanted to ask you both, and this is another question that we bring up because one of the things that I think Improve the Dream has done really well is to get the word out and really collect a lot of members into their organization. So I wanted to ask you both, how did you get introduced to Improve the Dream? Can you just tell me a little bit about what each of your involvement has been with Improve the Dream?
I can go first.
Okay, go ahead. Yep, sorry.
You're good. I first heard about Improve the Dream very recently through an NPR article, and that was the first time I've read an article on NPR that related to so much. I've known of a handful of friends that are also documented dreamers, and I also we've been able to connect and kind of figure out the random bureaucratic processes together, but I didn't really understand or know that there's over 200,000 documented dreamers in the United States, and it's since finding about Improve the Dream maybe 2 months ago, I took the survey that you mentioned earlier, and I've just been able to connect with other documented dreamers, and my twin sister recently wrote an article about her experience, which is about the same as mine, and I'm just hoping to be more of an advocate for documented dreamers and able to share my story so more people who are in the same situation and who are no idea what documented dreamers are kind of have an understanding.
That's awesome. Yeah, shout out to my friend and super advocate at NPR, Hafsa Fatima, who just does a great job in bringing awareness and has been out at the front of this for a long time at NPR. So shout out to Hafsa if you're watching at some point. Really appreciate all that she's done. Niranjana, what about you? How did you get involved with Improve the Dream?
So I first heard about Improve the Dream around the time that the Dream and Promise Act was passed in the House. And at that time, I didn't really know any other documented dreamers other than, just close family friends, cousins and stuff. And so it was actually my parents who found the Twitter handle and told me to follow him and a couple of other Twitter usernames. And from there, I found out about Improve the Dream, took the survey, joined the Slack group, sent it to pretty much anyone that I knew who was a documented dreamer or was a parent of a documented dreamer. And then since then, it's been incredible. I've been able to kind of help with a lot of the graphics and just put out content that educates a lot of people who might not know what the issue really is about, or even the details about maybe what aging out means, or what the process is through for a college student going through aging out. So yeah, that's how I've been able to contribute. And I've honestly felt so relieved since I've joined Improve the Dream, just because before this, I didn't really feel like there was anyone else who was going through the same thing. And now there's a whole community of people that I know who are, fighting for this cause as well. So yeah.
That's awesome. Well, very, very cool. And, it's always interesting to know how the awareness comes to your attention, right? And to be associated with an organization like Improve the Dream. And honestly, I wanted to kind of close up with the introductions here with the two of you. Just, why decide to come on tonight and, share and tell your story? I mean, I think that's something as we looked about takes a lot of grit and a lot of moxie to want to come on and bring awareness to this situation and bring attention to yourself personally. Niranjan, I wanted to start with you. Why did you decide to come on tonight?
So I think as documented dreamers, we all go through very similar struggles, but at the same time, a lot of our experiences are also very unique. And personally, hearing other documented dreamer stories gave me the courage to talk about my own experience. And that's why I kind of wanted to come on and talk about, some my personal journey and just tell any documented dreamer out there that you're not alone in this. And it's always good to reach out to, people that are maybe going through the same situation so you can get help in terms of, applying for internships or even any college application advice. Like personally, those two things helped me a lot. So that's my message to like a lot of the documented dreamers out there.
Awesome. Eva, what about you?
I think there's two reasons I'm here. One, I aged out maybe around 3 or 4 years ago. So I've luckily was able to work on OPT and then also now on an H1B and went through the lottery process. But I've gone through the whole process of switching from H4 to F1 to OPT to H1B. And I want to kind of provide some hope and some guidance to younger document dreamers on like emotionally and going through that process, but also like, how going through that process financially, the job hunting process, and be able to provide some of my input and the experiences I had. Also, I think I've never seen a story so similar to mine been on NPR, have any type of national attention, and there's definitely so much change so much change that I feel like can happen, and I've honestly have never been this hopeful in my entire like immigration history for some sort of change until I've seen Deep and Improve the Dream and the amount of support they've gotten from politicians, from document dreamers, and just the communities. And so I want to be a part of that, and hopefully I can, be a part of the change, and so that, in 10 years, 20 years time, there's not document dreamers aren't an issue.
Yeah, we look back on it and it was just a blip in history, right?
Yeah.
And it's funny we can kind of go back and look at the momentum that started for the documented dreamer cause. It goes back to friend of the channel, Perrine Matre's testimony for the Judiciary Committee. And then you look at there was coverage and Rep Deborah Ross's jurisdiction with the Raleigh Times, I believe, covered it, and a couple of the news stations there as well. So the story and the awareness has continued because these are real stories and they're genuine stories. And so, thank you to both of you for coming on and sharing your stories and why you're involved with Improve the Dream and ultimately what it's like to kind of live this documented dreamer experience and journey that you both have been on. I wanted to ask everyone, if you haven't already, please like this video, subscribe to the H1B Guy channel here on YouTube. Make sure you click the bell for notifications so that you're notified anytime I go live like we have here tonight. Also wanted to mention, if you have a documented dreamer or you are a parent of a documented dreamer, improvethedream.org/survey. Go complete that survey, and then someone will be in touch from Improve the Dream. We'll get you on the Slack channel that Niranjana alluded to earlier. And get those dreamers involved in terms of having a sense of community and a support system in place. And I think that's something that's been so important. So what we're going to do now, I wanted to also, we've got some comments in the chat. For those of you who are watching, if you have questions or comments, we will do a Q&A after we go to Deep here for an Improve the Dream update. And everything that's been going on here that's been really at a blur's pace over the last few weeks. So Deep, what I'm going to do, I'm just going to hand it off to you and let you give us an Improve the Dream update, talk about everything that's been going on here recently over the last few weeks. And just a reminder, if you have questions, post those in the chat, and the four of us will do our best to get to those time permitting. So Deep, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks, Rob. I just wanted to thank Eva and Niranjana for sharing their stories. And I wanted to mention that Niranjana, she said that, she's been helping a lot with the content creation and all of that. She designed like the America's Children Act website, which if you guys haven't checked it out, it's really good, really informative at americaschildrenact.com. So Niranjana, she did an amazing job designing that. And then Eva as well. I just wanted to mention, like, all of these stories that documented dreamers share is the reason why, like, we're getting all of this attention and all of this support, and also finding and connecting to more documented dreamers. Like Eva said, like finding the NPR article that led her to finding, Improve the Dream, and that's really how, like, we're getting our voices heard, by having more documented dreamers share their stories. So. Definitely like share improvethedream.org/survey if you guys know any other documented dreamers. And then I had a couple updates that I wanted to kind of discuss regarding kind of recent things that we were able to get accomplished. So over the summer, we had a policy change that DHS made for non-immigrant students who are transitioning over to the F1. So they got rid of the B2 bridge policy. And that was something that we advocated to the White House and DHS for. And thankfully, after meeting with them several times with groups of documented dreamers, they were able to make that policy change. So now there is no requirement to have to apply for a B2 bridge for documented dreamers or other non-immigrant visa holders, whether it's an E2, H4, and transitioning to an F1. And I got some questions about that, about whether that would mean that you can attend, if you can continue attending school. And we received clarification that students would be able to continue attending school. So just wanted to put that out there. And then two of the biggest things that we've had happen over the last month is the introduction of America's Children Act, both in the House and just yesterday in the Senate. It's a bipartisan introduction from Senator Padilla, Senator Rand Paul, Senator Durbin, Collins, and Senator Coons. And then we've also gotten included in the budget reconciliation bill, which has the best chance of any immigration reform that's, to pass in the past decade. So it's a lot of exciting things happening. And I think we're very well positioned to get documented dreamers included in the final thing that passes.
That's awesome, Dee. I wanted to drill in a little bit in some of the differences, just for clarity and even for my perspective. America's Children First Act, which was introduced by Representative Deborah Ross about 6 weeks ago now, maybe a little bit longer than that, not shortly after the Documented Dreamers series episode 5 aired. Back at the end of June. But what are, I guess, the protections that are included in the budget reconciliation versus what's in the America's Children's Act that are different? Because I believe that the budget reconciliation, there's a few that aren't protected in that language. Is that accurate, or am I incorrect in that assumption?
So, in the budget reconciliation bill, one of the biggest changes we were able to get, even over the Dream and Promise Act, which the Dream and Promise Act included documented dreamers, but only if we had come on an E1, E2, H1B, or L visa as a dependent of one of those visas. And what we were able to do is get them to just get rid of those status restrictions and just say that basically all documented or undocumented children would qualify under those sections. And thankfully, they applied that to even the other sections in the reconciliation bill, which, I think there's an essential workers, farm workers. Mm-hmm. So for all of those sections, whether it's dreamers or essential workers, they're going to let people on any of the non-immigrant visas also qualify, which makes a lot of sense. But that's the biggest change. And I think that is a big improvement over the Dream and Promise Act. But one thing that we're still trying to improve in the reconciliation bill is that continuous physical presence. A lot of people have been asking about that because it's obviously going to, matter and whether you travel or not. But we've gotten like assurances from, like staff that that's going to be interpreted as it has in the past, which is, casual brief absences such as travel wouldn't matter. However, that's still left up to the interpretation of DHS. So during the Biden administration, they would interpret that broadly, but if it was a different administration, they might not interpret that as broadly. So we're hoping that they still change that language, or at least specify that breaks in presence would be allowed up to like a certain period of time. And that language was included in the Dream and Promise Act. So we're hoping that gets included. And then one more thing that we're advocating for is to make sure that even documented dreamers who had to self-deport would be able to qualify. Because obviously, documented dreamers were not able to qualify for DACA or the DACA protections. So I don't think it's fair for people in our situation who had to leave because of that to not qualify for this. So we're advocating for language that would add a clause that says that anyone who was lawfully present for an aggregate of 10 years would be exempt from any continuous presence requirement. And that would allow, anyone that had to self-deport, maybe even for like a year or more and come back, they would be able to qualify.
And was there a date of entry, July 1st, 2011? What was the date that I've been reading?
So for the reconciliation bill, the date is actually just this year. So anyone who entered before January 1st, 2021.
Okay, got it.
But the issue with that is it requires having been like continuously present since that date. So in some scenarios, if someone had like, let's say someone had to self-deport last year and they just came back under a certain other visa, or if someone had to self-deport before and they weren't continuously residing, because the bill also requires you to be here or at least continuously reside since your entry that was under the age of 18. It's kind of complicated, but so basically, like the way it's currently written, as long as you entered the country before your 19th birthday, so 18th or younger, and have been continuously residing since then. So since that under 19th entry, whatever the most recent entry is, and then you've also been continuously physically present since the start of this year.
So walk me through the process then, which is documented dreamers included with undocumented as part of a budget reconciliation, and then kind of in this debate, right? You and I go back to September 15th was kind of the deadline, quote unquote, of what language would or would not be included in the Senate version. But then, the America's Children Act text is released in the Senate kind of in the middle of this. And, it kind of, to me, it tells a couple of different stories, right? I think the first story is that you get included where you can and you take advantage of what you can when that opportunity presents itself. But then there also has to be kind of a standalone protection behind it. We've talked about the Dream and Promise Act a good bit and that language, and then why come out with America's Children Act if it's going to be similar, but it's a little bit more of a standalone that addresses a documented issue, if you will. Why release the Senate text this week? Do you have any intel into the process, that the thought process behind that?
Yeah, so a few things. First, like I'll just clarify, like the Dream and Promise Act and the Reconciliation Bill, they're both like a one-time solution. So regardless of like even if that passes, which obviously would be amazing because all of us would be on a clear path to citizenship. But even if that passes, I hope America's Children Act and the language in that can still become law, even whether it gets included in reconciliation or whether it's in the future, because as Eva mentioned earlier, like our hopes, like our collective hopes are that in the future, 10 years from now, there aren't more dreamers or documented dreamers that are going through the same issues that we're going through, right? So that's why we're trying to get the best language possible that provides permanent protections and not just a one-time solution. And as far as like the timing of the introduction, I know there's been a lot of like a lot of people were commenting and asking, there's something fishy about this. Like, why would Senator Durbin or these senators introduce this? But behind the scenes, there's a lot that goes on to like get the bill introduced. The goal was to introduce this 2 months ago, along with the House version of America's Children Act, but we just had some things that were being worked on in the background. And this was just the earliest time we had the opportunity to introduce it. So like in a way you could say that it was up to us whether we wanted it introduced now. And obviously I think it's worth taking the earliest opportunity to introduce it. So
Correct.
It's nothing to do with the senators. I mean, if anything, we had to push them to do it because even for them, it's a hard thing to have to introduce this during a week that essentially everyone's waiting for like the Senate parliamentarian to say whether they can allow reconciliation to go. So, I mean, this was like one of the hardest things. The hardest thing we've done. So I think, it's being able to get Senator Padilla and Senator Durbin and Senator Paul to do this right now.
Coons too. I mean,
Coons, yeah.
The list. I mean, again, the bipartisan text addressing a very specific issue becomes a blueprint for inclusion in a much larger package. It just does. And unfortunately, in what's in it for me world, sometimes when you get the text introduced, it solves your problem and not others. You can be a target. And so, to me, I come back to your point about budget reconciliation and what it does. It's a one-time fix if we look at for the judiciary piece of it. And I've been pretty quiet on this all across all of my platforms, and I still come back to another consistent theme here of this issue, the documented dreamer issue, and what's caused a lot of it, specifically in the H4 world, goes back to country caps on employment-based preferences. And so what we have to do is look at the pieces of legislation that address those issues and how can they be included in larger reforms as those begin to earn a lot bigger budget, because that's what it's all about. It's all about the funding that goes behind it and how we're going to go about implementing it. So I think, listen, the timing was interesting to me, but as you said, you've got to take advantage of it while you can, and knowing that it is a bipartisan approach. There's not really, to me, anything negative that comes from that. So I thought that was really interesting. Go ahead.
And yeah, I just wanted to say, like, just to explain, like, the timing, it's not like, the senators last week got together and said, hey, let's introduce this bill now and just do it. This was going on for several months, right? Like several months. So the timing, there's nothing like fishy about the timing. It's I think the right time is like whenever you can introduce it. So I think we got that. Yeah.
So really quickly, 60 seconds, what's on the horizon right now for Improve the Dream? What do those that are watching now, or who's going to consume this probably in the next week or so, what do we need to be looking out for and aware of?
Yeah, so the biggest thing right now is whether the Senate parliamentarian will approve of the language that is currently in like the House version of the reconciliation bill. So, you know, the House has included that language and passed it through the Judiciary Committee. It could happen any day now, or it could take a few more weeks. We don't know how long the parliamentarian is going to take. And from what it seems like, they've had multiple discussions with the parliamentarian. The parliamentarian has asked for more evidence, and they've provided more evidence. And just like my amateur opinion, I would say, I think the fact that the parliamentarian requested them to meet several times and asked for more evidence, there seems like there could be a decent chance. Like, it's not something that she, you know, she's just saying that there isn't a chance, because by now she could have easily said no. But she asked to meet twice and requested more evidence. And from my understanding, this is just their, like the Democrats' first proposal, right? Like, if she says no to this, they still have a plan B, C, and D. So I think there is a reason to be hopeful that this could go through. And kind of moving on to the reason for also having America's Children Act, we're hoping that because that bill has bipartisan support, it's going to make it easier for us to argue for any improvements to the current reconciliation bill if they do make changes. So we want to make sure that people who had to self-deport can get included, and basically no documented dreamer gets left out. And I think it's going to really help us do that.
That's it's good stuff, man. I've got to ask you this. This wasn't on the agenda, but do you sleep at all?
I sleep, yeah.
I mean, I know you work a full-time job, and you've got very clearly another full-time job on your hands here. I mean, it just I always talk about how
maybe the last week was a little rough, but yeah.
I always talk about how impressed I am with you, man. And you know, I think when you look at why has this cause gained the traction that it has, well, I think it comes back to, one, it's common sense. But two, you've gone about it the right way and working through the appropriate channels and groups and bringing awareness to it. And there's a blueprint, Deep, that you've put in place here for other groups out there that are looking to bring awareness and advocacy to their issue. I think, man, when this is said and done, it's going to be time for you to sit down and put a pen to paper and tell this story on a much broader scale. We're going to roll through some Q&A really quickly. There's some questions and comments, some of which we've talked about, some of which I just wanted to bring awareness. We've got a few minutes here if you have questions for Deep, for Naranjana, for Eva. I know that you've been putting those in the chat, but now's the time. Let's get those in there. We're going to roll through them real quick. We'll just start up at the top and work our way down. Ron says, thanks, Deep, for all that you've done. Great work. Friend of the show, Dr. Raj Karnatak says, proud of these young immigrants. We have a moral responsibility to speak up against this discrimination. Yeah, that's what it comes down to when you're discriminated by country of birth. You know, ultimately, that's what this comes down to. Even in the E2 world, right? It has that similarity that you're discriminated by country of birth, even when you're a legal childhood arrival. Hey, Suresha, good to see you. He says, thank you very much for all the efforts. Another good friend of the show, my friend Samir, says, hey, guys, happy to see you all in. Kudos to Deep and the team for amazing efforts he and the team are taking on. And thanks to Robert for continuing this legal fight. Samir, thank you for the super chat sticker, man. Really appreciate that. Didn't have to do that tonight, but thank you for joining. Padma says, great job for all of you for speaking your mind and explaining the extra hardships us documented dreamers go through. Hopefully something good will that this year has to help us. And I think that's a great point. I think that hope is something that can motivate and drive us. And when you begin to see the awareness happen, like an NPR, like a member of the organization give her testimony to the House Judiciary Committee, the awareness that began to really stir up for Improve the Dream. Deep, I know you addressed some of this too. But Ron had a question here, and I'm going to bring this up. It just said, talking about this continued physical presence. I know you were talking about kind of the temporary travel, and his follow up was that, hey, thanks for clarifying. And for owners of E2 investors of essential workers, would they qualify?
Yeah, so E2, I think, from my understanding, most E2 visa holders should be able to qualify under the essential workers section. Now it's going to come down to whether the work that you're doing is considered essential. But from my understanding, it's like very broadly written that about 90% of everything could possibly qualify. So under a Biden administration, like when they're like doing it, I'm pretty sure they'll have like very broad interpretations to where most people will be able to qualify.
Yeah, that's interesting that you bring that up. This whole critical infrastructure term is one that a lot of us seem to be loving right now. His follow up also, Ron asked, "Do you see Dream and Promise Act lasting a long time, years, decades, or as this Republican administration comes to power, would they potentially end this?" That's a great question. It does matter who's in charge. That's for sure. There's no doubt about that. Deep, do you have any thoughts on that one?
So I'm assuming this means like if it passed, if they would reverse it.
Yep, exactly. That's the way I'm interpreting that.
That's definitely possible, but so actually that's a good point. So it's like if they pass this through reconciliation right now, what if they reverse it through reconciliation in 4 years, right? I guess the hope would be that if this were to pass now, they wouldn't have a chance to reverse it. Like, because, they're still in the administration for 2 to 3 years, so they could probably get things going. And then also, I have a feeling like if they were to pass something for Dreamers or for all immigrants, it would be kind of unpopular after that point to reverse that. So that probably wouldn't happen. So yeah, I think they wouldn't have like enough support to reverse it. So they probably wouldn't be able to overturn it. But I would expect, like, if it was a Republican administration versus a Democrat administration, like as far as how DHS would interpret like regulations, that might get like stricter. So that's like when the continuous presence stuff might be more of a problem, and that's why I think they need to like fix that.
That's interesting. Yeah, always a gap there that can create a problem. Hey, Nigel, good friend of the show here as well. We've shared his daughter's story, Aaron and Morgan, who came on Documented Dreamers episode 3, I believe they came on. He's curious when the parliamentarian is likely to rule in the budget reconciliation. Any intel that you can share with that, Deep?
It could be anywhere from like tomorrow to like a few more weeks. So kind of like any time now, but I think most people think like it should be within the next few weeks.
Well, and the House news came down, was it like late last Friday? If I remember, the text, kind of the proposed text started showing up for public consumption. It's interesting, but again, they've returned from summer session, so they're full gas right now. Samir says that you're lying about the sleep part because you answer questions in like minutes on some of these groups. Proud of the kids sharing their story, and little one looks up to them as future heroes. Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a lesson to be learned here, that if you want change to happen, you've got to go and make it happen. You can't hope someone else is going to do it for you. Nigel had a follow-up. Deep, what does the E2 investors essential worker language mean? Is this splitting E2 investors into 2 categories, and by extension complicating the visa? And E2 meaning E2 treaty investor visa, which is not considered dual intent and does not provide a pathway to permanent residency citizenship for E2 treaty investors. So any idea on this, Deep?
Yeah, so the text doesn't actually do anything to change the E2 visa. It's just saying, like, the budget reconciliation bill is essentially saying for this one time, anyone who was continuously present has been working as an essential worker for a certain period of time is able to apply for a green card. And then it says like they have like a list. It's like the guidance on essential critical infrastructure workforce that the government published, which has a list of a ton of occupations on there. And it's very broad. And it's kind of hard to understand like exactly which professions would qualify, because technically like some of the things that are listed there, you could argue like professions that really aren't listed can also do. So it's really broadly written. And I think like David Beer, who's a policy analyst, he tweeted
Cato
that
Institute.
yeah, he tweeted that this could like be assumed to be like 90% of all professions. So
Right.
so yeah.
Yeah, I've been messaging with him a little bit back and forth on that, trying to just determine what's considered essential and critical, and it's a lot going on there in that space. But great stuff. Brimmel says, "Great job, guys. Hopefully, this reconciliation bill gives us all the stability we desire. Really proud of you." Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of hope in that legislation right now. A lot of anxiety around it, a lot of misinformation that's being put out there around it. And my take is, my best advice here is that I didn't think language that would clear the backlog and recapture visas would be included, and it is. So I'm going to continue to allow myself to be pleasantly surprised as this thing evolves over the next potentially 24 hours to a couple of weeks. I did want to share, I know it's behind a paywall, but I'm going to bring it up. There was a link in an article today in the New York Times. Right here, here's the link if you guys want to find it, but you can find it out there. I believe Improve the Dream shared it. Deep, I know you shared it as well. But wow, New York Times, that's what I would consider to be mainstream media, a step above NPR for those of us who like to keep up with it. Deep, any insight here into this article?
Yeah, I think it just shows like how, like you said, it's like reaching mainstream media and like we're getting the attention that we need. And the only thing I'd say is like, I think we're at a point now that like documented dreamers definitely won't be forgotten anymore, like by, legislators. So regardless of what happens, like in the next few weeks, like whenever they're doing immigration reform, I think the solutions that we've advocated for are going to be included, like in whatever ends up passing next.
Yeah, that's great. I wanted to ask the three of you one last question here. And that is, listen, there's nothing that's set in stone. All signs point to positive reform. Why do you think this cause has had the success and gained the attention it has? Deep, I want to start with you on this one.
I think really the main reason is the stories are very real. These stories have always existed. I think like a lot of us have felt like we couldn't speak up. And once
Almost
we all
afraid
start
to speak up, right?
exactly, yeah. Well, afraid to speak up, and then also thinking like we're not allowed to or can't, or all of those things. And I feel like those voices weren't heard before, because the dreamers have been fighting for this for a pretty long time, and unfortunately, we had been excluded from all of those solutions in the past. But I think they recognize now that essentially we do exist, right? So I think really the stories were there, but now they're being heard, and that's the biggest reason. It's the biggest reason why. Yeah.
Eva, what do you think about the reason?
I think the fact that that Improve the Dream exists has led to the amount of growth and a lot of exposure, because it's really consolidated all the stories. Like I've heard one-off stories from a friend of mine and from my sister, but I never really understood how large of a scale this impacts. Is not just a handful of people, it's hundreds of thousands. of kids who came here, you know, without a say, right? And they would like to stay here because it's their lives. And I think it just makes a lot of sense. And now that it's becoming more like public that this is affecting mass number of people. This is a real like clear flaw in the legal immigration system. I think that's why it's kind of now it's becoming more just known to the public.
Niranjana, you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree with Deep and Eva. I think that there's, you know, the number speaks for itself. The 200,000 documented dreamers that are out there. It's really important that, you know, people hear about all these stories, and I think I agree with Deep that that's been one of the main factors that has contributed to, you know, this issue becoming so important now.
Yeah, and I think that what I would tell you is that it's not done yet, right? We've celebrated some wins. Everything that's happened, you know, in the last 9 months have been small wins along the way, but the big win will be when it's signed into law, and we can't let up. We'll continue to bring awareness. There are some other groups out there. We've had individuals from the Hidden Dream on as part of the Improve the Dream advocacy. They're a great group. They have a lot of good advocacy efforts going on there as well. But I just want to mention one last time, improvethedream.org/survey. If you have a documented dreamer, or you are a documented dreamer who is watching this either live or after the fact, and you want to know how you can get involved, the best way to get involved is improvethedream.org/survey. In the video description below, or all of the links as well, if I didn't repeat it to you enough times here tonight. But I wanted to just say thanks again to you, Deep, for coming on and helping, you know, me to bring and spread awareness here on the H1B Guy platform to the Documented Dreamers cause. Indebted to Eva and Niranjana for coming on and sharing your personal stories. I know that it's not something that's easy to do, and so really appreciative of you, and hope that we look back at this at some point in the future and know that this conversation led to somebody signing up to improvethedream.org/survey and becoming part of the 200,000 strong. I want to say thank you to our sponsors for this live stream tonight. My good friend Richard Allman with RecruiterNetworks.com. RecruiterNetworks.com is the smart solution for digital perm ads and local job postings since 2001. This national job board network provides recruitment websites in 1,024 major U.S. metro areas. Each local job board is its own portal, a low-cost resource for immigration recruitment ads and local job postings for all industries and professions, with a flat price of $225 per ad or $1,000 per month, regardless of which city you choose. Tell my friend Richard Allman at RecruiterNetworks.com that the H1B Guy sent you. And also by my friend Mark Pavlovopoulos with Path to Canada. Path to Canada provides an ideal plan B for high-skilled immigrants currently located in the U.S. whose status may be uncertain. If you're facing an H-1B denial or OPT expiration, don't get caught off guard. Make sure you have a plan B, and the team at Path to Canada will gladly help you navigate the process. If you're interested in finding out more, please be sure to use the link in the video description below. Thanks to Mark for your continued sponsorship. And my friend Carl Balsmeyer at perm-ads.com. Perm-ads.com is the industry leader in providing a seamless experience for employers and immigration attorneys navigating the complex perm recruitment ad phase of the labor certification process. If you're looking to reduce your costs and overhead associated with perm labor certification recruitment advertising, let Carl Balsmeyer and his team at perm-ads.com help you. Just wanted to go around really quickly one last time. You know, Niranjana, thank you for coming on. Really appreciate it. Eva, thank you so much for coming on. Deep, I'm sure we'll set something up. It's mid-September, probably looking end of October, maybe beginning of November. We'll have another episode. Hopefully that'll be a
Hopefully to celebrate. Yeah.
Yes, a celebratory episode. And if we do, what we'll try to do is we'll have every documented dreamer that's been on, we'll open an invite. I will go and try to add as many licenses as I can here to restream, to have everybody on, and we'll have a party where we just talk over each other for maybe 20 or 30 minutes. That probably is nothing but smiles and laughs, but we'll keep our fingers crossed. We've got a lot of work still to do. We cannot let up off the gas, and just wanted to say thank you to the three of you for joining me tonight. One last time, I'd like to ask you, if you haven't already, to please like this video, subscribe to the H1B Guy channel here on YouTube, and click the bell for notifications so that you're notified anytime we go live or I post new content here to this channel. Of course, if you made it this far and you stuck with us, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for your support, supporting the Documented Dreamers and supporting the H1B Guy platform. I just really, really appreciate it. Cannot do it without you. I'm Robert. This has been the Documented Dreamers series live, featuring contributors from Improve the Dream. I'm the H1B Guy, your global source for all things H1B.